So there was a data point that we found out, which was very key in how we looked at things, is that we found out that when the customer gets the third order, they are extremely loyal after that, which is really interesting. And they're even more loyal if an order messes up within those 3 orders, and then we fix it, and then we give a credit to the next order. If you mess up, but then you correct it and give great customer service afterwards, they become extremely loyal afterwards. And the magic number was 3. We got to get them to the third order. And so that was something that we kind of focused on, is like, okay, make sure the first 3 orders, they go very well. If something messes up, we'll give them a little bit more extra credit than if they were like if they've been with us for a very long time, because we want to get them to that third order. And then at the same time, we also like, okay, let's shoot them like some deals if they're like they've only ordered from us once or twice, and then kind of get them back into our like the habit of ordering food delivery. It's just like boom, like we 80% chance they stay with us forever.
I think maybe we can sort of like rewind the clock a little bit on how you got started, and maybe even before Caviar, because I think Caviar was obviously the main headline, but I think there's a lot of stuff that what happened beforehand that got you into and sort of all those experiences. Do you want to just give a quick backstory on your growing up? I know probably Bay Area native for you, and then schooling, and sort of go from there.
Sure. I actually was raised in LA. My parents were Chinese immigrants who actually had me in Japan. So I actually lived in Japan for 5 years, and then we immigrated to Los Angeles. Came up to the Bay Area because I attended University of California, Berkeley, and that's also where I met my future co-founders. We met at a fraternity at UC Berkeley, and my senior year, a couple of my future Caviar co-founders, they approached me to do a different company called Munch On Me, which was a daily deals company. So at the time, Groupon, Living Social, all these daily deal companies were popping up, and my buddies wanted to do a daily deals for food website, and so that company actually got into Y Combinator. And once that happens, initially I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this whole entrepreneurship stuff, because I already had a offer to go work at an architecture firm because I was an architecture major and background.
Wait, so how did you go from like architecture to finding your own company?
Right. I mean, initially my friends wanted help for marketing materials and sales and stuff on the business side, and I'm like, well, I can do the marketing stuff. That's easy. I learned design in school. I know how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, all those tools, and it was easy for me to like put together a bunch of flyers, design whatever little stuff that we need on the website. And sales is, I don't know, I just picked it up. I just figured out how to do it on the fly, and then that company went through Y Combinator. I had just graduated, and one of our other co-founders, Andy, actually dropped out of school to do this. And so this was 2011, summer 2011, and then at the end of that year, we realized that we were running out of money, and it was almost impossible to raise money for this industry because of how badly Groupon was getting destroyed in the markets. And so that was when we needed to figure out what to do, should we pivot, should we just go back to our old jobs, but luckily we did decide to pivot end of 2011, and that turned out to become Caviar.
So tell me a little bit about, backing up here, because I know Groupon, they used to be huge. They were really, really big.
Yeah.
And then something happened, and they didn't do so well. There was a downturn in that part of the industry itself. Can you explain a little bit more about the backstory about what happened and
Right.
why it took a turn for the worse?
So Groupon IPO'd that year, and it was a disastrous IPO. Their stock just tanked, and a lot of it was because they saw that it was a lot of cost to run that company. They had just call centers of people trying to do sales, and the retention of their restaurants or vendors were very, very low, because for a restaurant, when you give out 50% off or even 25% off deals, it's not just they're not just giving the discount to the customers, they're also paying the services like Groupon and Munch on Me and Live and Social at the time a fee to promote these discounts. So restaurants are losing a lot of money doing these deals, and what a lot of vendors and clients found out was that when they do discounts and marketing deals, they end up getting really cheap customers in the door, and they tend to not come back unless there's further discounts, which means it's for a vendor, you're just losing money on top of just wasted time, really. And so that really sunk the Groupon stock, and because of that, we weren't able to raise any money with venture capital. It was very unsexy at the time.
So it sounds like obviously there was a piggyback sort of like mentality, and we've seen this as well, like in the fast delivery space. When something takes off, then there'll be other people coming into the ecosystem and trying to do similar things,
right,
maybe with a few little nuances here and there. But then once the whale sinks, then it brings all those other ships down with it. But maybe that was probably a good thing in hindsight as well, because that allowed you to pivot into what it was now sort of like known Caviar. But before we get into Caviar, let's talk about sort of the entrepreneurial journey, at least in college level, because I think you went to school there at UC Berkeley, but then also you met a bunch of founders. In hindsight, if you didn't meet them and you didn't talk about building a company together, do you think that you would have just continued on your architecture path?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't really see any other vision at the time. I had committed so much of my time and money into becoming an architect. Like I started learning about architecture and taking classes in community college since I was in high school, like early high school. I was building my portfolio since then, and so I was kind of set on going to an architecture school and then becoming an architect right afterwards. So definitely would have been a completely different life.
What was the pivot though? Because if you invested all of this money into your future, which was going to be architecture, and you had sort of like tunnel vision, like, okay, this is where I want to be, I see where I want to be in the next 5 to 10 years, why make such a massive shift into entrepreneurship, knowing that wasn't stable? You didn't really put any effort or even had a thought of becoming a founder. Was it something about the allure of becoming a founder that sort of got you over the line, or did some of your buddies tell you and convince you to come over? Because I know that for a lot of people out there, they've probably invested a lot of money and time and resources into their future and seeing exactly what their future is going to look like. But then all of a sudden something happens, but we don't know what that something happened is. But like for you, can you sort of pinpoint an exact moment where you feel like, well, architecture is fine and it's great, it's stable, and this is what I want to go, but entrepreneurship is more fun, is more exciting? What was the tipping point for you?
So when my senior year, that's when my future co-founders were convincing me to join them. I wasn't really doing anything. I could have graduated early, but instead I extended my time at the university because I was having a good time. I was able to pay tuition by working for the American football team that we had there, and my co-founder Jason Wang, who became the CEO, was very good at convincing me to just drop everything, just try this out for like half a year. Like the salary I was going to get out of university was going to be like 30,000 US per year, and that's really nothing. So I was like, okay, well, if I push this back a year, like what's, it's not like I'm getting paid like a significant salary right out of university. So, I had some money saved up. I could stay with my parents as a backup if I needed to. And so I was like, you know what, might as well like take a chance and see where this takes me. I knew that I can always go back into architecture if I wanted to, and I didn't think like a year or two would set me back in my career.
What were some of the tactics that your co-founder used? Because that's really interesting. I mean, it sounds like he's a very persuasive guy. So
yeah.
I think it's probably a good life skill to have. So what did he actually say? How did he actually do it?
I will definitely say a good CEO needs to be a very, very good recruiter. So that is one thing that I'll give Jason a lot of credit, is this guy is a hype man. Like, definitely knows how to recruit people, definitely knows how to sell his vision, and that, which I found to be an extremely important skill set if you're going to be a CEO. Which of course carries over to when you're trying to raise money with venture capitalists. So he was pretty much telling me the same thing like I'm telling you now. It's like, well, like what kind of salary are you going to get after a year? It's like maybe 30, maybe I'll get up to 45K, then I might have to go back to school to further my education. So he's like, well, like, if we do well, like you can easily get that salary, if not more, if we raise money. And is it possible that you can go back into architecture? I'm like, yeah, of course. I told him I think I'm good enough to be able to go back, and I have friends in the industry and they can probably give me a job as well. And honestly, like I was very excited to take on this journey just because we're in the Bay Area. We're exposed to Silicon Valley news all the time. Even if I wasn't really in the industry, I knew what TechCrunch was. I knew Facebook and all the amazing stories of college dropouts starting tech companies. And I was definitely sold on that vision of you can create something from nothing. And I live in the exact place where all of this happens. I just felt like it, in terms of timing, which was several years after the Great Recession, things were starting to pick up in the economy. The location that I was, and with the people that I like to be around, my good friends, like, why not like try this out? Like, I feel like it was like a once in a lifetime opportunity that was presented in front of me, versus like with architecture, I can always go back. And so I just couldn't let go of that chance, and so I just went for it.
And I think definitely one thing that you mentioned that probably is worth noting is the environment that you're in, and the fact that you were in the Bay Area, the fact that you're in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. There is definitely a lot of stuff happening around you, and I can imagine the amount of you're basically learning through osmosis, through what other people are doing. You're getting exposure to new, and I think that shouldn't be understated in any way, because I think the environment definitely shapes you. And who knows, if you still were in LA, for example, or if you were in a different school, you just can't imagine what the circumstances would have been different. And I think it was just right timing, right place, right moment, right friends to sort of like bring everything together. So I think the one thing that I would probably tell the audience is that if becoming more self-aware of your environment, if you think that there's an opportunity, don't let it go. Just take it. Even if it seems more risky, it might be worth considering, because there's always a chance that this thing could do very, very well, and you can always go to something more safer if it doesn't work out.
That's right. A lot of people say that, oh, you're so lucky that you happened to attend this school, met these people, had the right idea. Well, like, you have to put yourself in a position to be lucky first. For sure, if I went to UCLA or USC, which were options in LA to go for university, I definitely wouldn't have gone into startup tech, because I was in Hollywood. If anything, like, maybe I've been enticed to go into Hollywood for, like, there's a lot of designers in the studio industry, so maybe I would have gone to that. Yeah, you never know. If I was on the East Coast, maybe I'm more into financing or corporate development of buildings and
banking,
stuff like that.
Corporate finance.
Yeah, exactly. So if it was definitely like it's definitely really important to put yourself in a place to succeed and put yourself around people that are similar minded as well. That's definitely the huge benefit of living in a major city, is that you tend to surround yourself with more ambitious people, and that makes you kind of play to a higher level. Something I learned from playing in a lot of sports in my life is that you only get better by surrounding yourself with better people. If you surround yourself with, shittier players or teammates, whatever, you play down to that level. So if you lived in a middle of nowhere city, you really limit yourself to opportunities. You play down to the environment that you are, versus when you're somewhere with people that has a lot of ambition, you play up to those ambitions as well.
Yeah, the bar definitely has been raised subconsciously, so you feel like you need to be on that level or better. So it's sort of like a balancing act. It's definitely more stress and pressure to keep up with the Joneses, but I think it definitely
Absolutely
helps you become much more better rounded, better person, and improve various skills. Let's quickly move forward to like Caviar now, because I think you mentioned that there was the Groupon days. You didn't do really well after that, then you couldn't raise venture capital. What was the time frame between when you had to dissolve that Groupon-like company to starting Caviar? Did you take a bit of a hiatus, or you like to founders, let's just start something the next day and go for it?
We pretty much started the next day. So what happened was that it was the fall or winter 2011. We went to a local university bar called Bear's Lair, and we discussed over beers, like, what should we do? We have like no money in the bank, and it's impossible for us to raise any money. So either we sell off the assets to a different daily deals company for pennies on the dollar, and then we go off and go find jobs, or we use whatever runway that we have left to figure out what the hell we're going to do next. And so, we did lose a co-founder because he was a Canadian citizen and needed to go get a work visa, so that was extremely unfortunate. So we lost a team member, and then but then the rest of us, we were saying, like, let's see if we can figure something out within 2 to 3 months. That's about the runway that we gave ourselves. And so within those 2 to 3 months is when we started to figure out how to build Caviar. So there was definitely a lot of ideas on the whiteboard, but food delivery was the one that stuck.
So what was obviously there's different founders have different stories for starting their companies. One was, one profile would be, I've worked in the industry for a while. I've seen a niche that could be taken advantage of and build a market out of that. Others are like, okay, let's just try to come up with ideas and let's just whiteboard and brainstorm stuff, right? With the stuff that you learned from the previous company, did that trickle over to sort of like the lessons learned for Caviar, and sort of seeing
absolutely
exactly what not to do and what to do right, and sort of using that experience to build a much more refined product?
So what we learned from the first company was that we weren't even using the product ourselves. It's definitely a telling sign if you're a consumer-facing company, and you're not even using your own product. So, we realized, if we're gonna fail, let's fail making a product that we will use almost every day, or something that we would love to do, just so that even if we only have several months, let's just work on something we're all gonna enjoy building, right? And solves a problem that we actually have. So during that time we had plenty of ideas on a whiteboard. We had peer-to-peer, like Airbnb for food, which is like somebody makes a batch of cookies, you can sell it to your neighbor and stuff like that. So we had the idea initially, and then it got shot down by Y Combinator's Paul Graham. So he said that's not a good idea right now. So we're like, okay, don't do that. And eventually we there's a few things that kind of lined up for us. So one, while we were closing down accounts on Munchami, we were talking to one of my partners was talking to a restaurant called HRD Coffee Shop, and they said, hey, you know, those daily deals obviously were not the best marketing tools for us, but if anything, like, can you do something that'll actually make me money? You know, so they're like, you know, anything that could increase our takeout orders or people coming in the door, like, without having to give discounts, like, we will be your guinea pig for it. We're like, okay, that's interesting. Okay, we have somebody, we can test some ideas out in the food space. At the same time, Uber was one of the hottest companies, raising like a ton of money. And at the time, we were like, well, you know, they were one of the first to really show everybody the value of independent couriers. That was not a thing in the US, and so, but Uber kind of brought that idea along, and then there was one day where I really wanted this sandwich from this place called Ike's Place Sandwich. It was a bit far for me to get to with public transportation, and I didn't want to pay for an Uber. I didn't want to, and then there was this one service called TaskRabbit that was like, that would have cost me a lot of money to pay somebody to go wait in a line, get a sandwich and bring it over to me. And so, you know, all these things kind of aligned, and we were like, dude, we can do this. We can make a Uber for food, which Uber already now
just
has.
Uber Eats now.
Like, we can do this. We can make the Uber for food. Let's just, we just got to figure out how to get as many couriers as possible. And then we already have a lot of restaurants in our Rolodex of business cards.
How did you choose the restaurants? Because I know that there's a ton of restaurants out there, but obviously some are popular, some are not popular. What was the strategy? Because did you have to carefully choose which restaurants to partner with in order to get that sort of like first set of customers?
Absolutely. So the biggest player in the food delivery space at the time was Grubhub and Seamless, but they didn't use independent couriers. What they did was they only had restaurants that had their own couriers to deliver food, and so those tended to be like really bad restaurants or pizza. So a lot of restaurants did not want to be on a delivery platform because they felt like it diluted their brand. And I understand. I get what they're trying to get at, and so and at the same time, like, I wanted to get food from very specific restaurants because I was so, like, my co-founder Jason and I, like, we were sort of picky in the places we wanted to get food. Like, if we're gonna get a sandwich, we're gonna get it from one of our favorite sandwich spots. If we're gonna get pasta, let's get it from like one of the top pasta places in San Francisco. Like, why waste a meal on something really bad? And so we knew that, okay, if we sign the places that we want, not only will we be able to get something that people actually want to eat, but also these restaurants have such a huge following that they're essentially the way that we can market without spending any money.
So how did you? Okay, so once you got the contract, or at least started working with these like big restaurant players who had a massive following on or I don't know if Instagram was back there, but it's on social media, and they would see on Yelp as well. There'll be a lot of reviews of these companies. Mm-hmm. How did you expose Caviar to those customers? Was it when was it on the menu? Was it through was there a sign at the front of the restaurant on the window saying that you can deliver an order through Caviar? What was your strategy there?
So pretty much anything we can do with a partnership with the restaurant, we did. And so usually I sign the restaurant and then I make marketing flyers for them that they can distribute in each order that they do, including takeout. And so what we also did was that I created like a table stands, which was super cheap to put on all the tables inside the restaurant. So when you're sitting there and like, hey, get this delivered next time, and people would download from those flyers. And then at the time, a lot of restaurants actually didn't even have a Twitter or Instagram or website, which was, which is crazy nowadays. But at the time, there was a lot of restaurants that didn't have like a social media presence. So we built it. So for those restaurants, we just created a widget on their website or created their Instagram handle, and it just backlinked to Caviar.
Nice. Yeah,
and
go ahead.
It was simple. Like as soon as they tweeted or put something on Instagram, like, oh, you can get our, so and so dish delivered through Caviar, and all of a sudden we would have like easily 1,000 customers like on the platform.
Okay, so that was sort of like a really an effective go-to-market strategy. You at that point, you hadn't really scaled up until that point. It's like dealing with the first initial set of customers, which was working pretty well. So you knew you had sort of like product market fit, and you knew that there was something there. Okay, let's talk about quickly scaling that then. So once you got, you were inundated with all of these, inquiries about using Caviar. Was there a system set in place already in Caviar to help operationalize this, especially at scale, or did you still have to figure out systems and processes to see? Because I'm interested to see how you guys actually did blow up and were able to serve so many people at a given time.
Right. So the scaling part was a little bit difficult just because we needed to operate like city to city,
mm-hmm.
right? So initially, my thinking was, well, don't worry about being super scalable. I just need every order to go perfectly, to have eyes on orders, right? We hadn't built everything that we needed on the back end tech side to kind of support all of our operations, and so it was a little bit easier to manage if I had like an operator or like the logistics person in each city that we were in, and so. In the beginning, when we started to expand, we knew that we always needed to hire one restaurant salesperson and one logistics person. And the logistics person essentially handled all the hiring the couriers, customer support, and any support that he needs to give to the restaurants. Versus the restaurant sales is all they have to focus is just the sales. Because again, like without the restaurants, we can't market, we can't, we're not going to get any orders. And so that's all they focused on. And so, but as soon as we got big enough in terms of our operations, and I felt like we had a good foothold in most of our cities in terms of our customer service, how the logistics were going, hiring couriers. Once I felt very comfortable, then I consolidated all of our logistics into San Francisco. And so that way we were set up to scale a lot quicker if all the operations were in one city. And then, but the sales, of course, would always be localized. So our playbook was always, okay, we go into another city, we hire like a restaurant salesperson and somebody else to help them out. They sign a bunch of restaurants, and then we turn it on. And then,
so how did you hire like the people in those cities? Was it actually going to LA or going to some other
mm-hmm.
city and sort of like finding people on the ground? And how did you recruit?
Yeah, I was boots on the ground. I went to all the cities, interviewed all of them. There was one time in New York where I was just interviewing so many people. I was like almost falling asleep in the interviews if they were like really boring. I'm just like, damn, this is like really difficult. But luckily, we hired some amazing people, and honestly, Caviar would not have been where it was without the people that we hired. I would recommend any of them to any company today.
So quick sidebar then, in terms of recruiting, what do you look for? Especially if you are a young company that doesn't have a lot of money to pay these people. Obviously, it's selling the vision is one part of it. Trying to,
mm-hmm.
being and showing them that this is a more of a long-term journey. But what do you look for in people to work with you at such an early stage and to stick it out as well, and and join you on the journey? What do you look for?
So I will tell you this, the people that were the best contributors to Caviar were very hungry in terms of what they wanted to learn. They're just like a freaking sponge. and you can tell in an interview, it's just like, okay, what do you want to do with your life? What is like, what do you want to learn here? This is quite risky being in a startup, and a lot of the ones that did well, it's like, well, I don't care if I start on the ground up. Like, I want to be in a fast-paced environment. I want to learn everything from, maybe I want to do an engineer here, or I want to do business sales, but I want to learn everything. And of course, for us, like, we wanted to make sure that they were also passionate about our product, and so I would ask them a lot of food questions. It's just like, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite restaurant? I want you to have an opinion about it, because we wanted to make sure every person that came into Caviar somehow connected with a customer. And so they need to be similar to the customer to kind of understand understand like what's the customer's problems are. We used to make every single employee do a minimum of like 1 day's worth of deliveries. I think I heard some of the DoorDash founders, they still do deliveries today just to see how things are going, and that's what I used to do too. I used to do deliveries almost like every day, making sure the product worked, that the customers loved it, that the restaurants loved it, that the couriers loved our app.
You mentioned that there was, during that time, as you were starting to scale, there was a bunch of competition in that space as well. There was Grubhub, and DoorDash hadn't emerged at that point yet. But they were sort of like up and coming and seamless. Were you monitoring the competition? How did you guys treat competition? Were you like, using spies and people just trying to like go into their operations and become a courier yourself and see how they work? What was the strategy for you to monitor, or even or you didn't even care about competition at that point?
I mean, like, of course we monitored the competition just to see where they were looking to expand into. How much money they're raising, what they're doing well. So I wouldn't say it's a good idea to completely ignore your competition. I think it's important to kind of check out the product, evaluate it. Why are people using it versus you? There must be a reason, right? And so a lot of times we figured out, like, okay, they're in certain regions, they have better restaurants, or because they don't actually partner, it's this fake shit that they do on the side. They're doing tons of discounts because they raise a ton of money. Maybe that's how they're getting a lot of customers, or their tech side is a lot smoother than ours or something. Those are things that you really have to check, just because you don't want to fall behind your competition in terms of your product. But otherwise, I try not to care too much about the competition. I had way too many problems with my own company, but I did end up hiring a bunch of people from competitors just because they just had a really terrible work environment. So it was easy to understand the operations of other companies just by hiring people from those companies.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I don't think you should be sort of maniacal about your competition. I think there are founders out there who are, but I think it's definitely good to just take note of who's in the ecosystem, who's doing what, and just sort of monitor them at least and see how things are going. And I think it's also a good way to measure yourself. It's a nice yardstick to say, look, are we on par? Are we subpar? Are we better? And see and go from there, because I think it's obviously healthy to have competition. You're always trying to improve the service for the customer at the end of the day, who is sort of your buyer. So I definitely empathize with the notion of working and sort of managing and monitoring the customers, the competitors in your network, and then go from there. How did you? Okay, let's move quickly forward again. So you've done pretty well. You've expanded into how many cities now? What was the height of Caviar? What was the numbers like?
So before we were acquired,
and this was the Square acquisition, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I believe we had launched in 12 cities. Throughout the U.S. when Square had acquired us, and then during that time, we had raised a Series A from Tiger Global, we raised around 12 million, no, 13 million Series A from Tiger Global. And that happened because we had ridiculously good retention numbers with a pretty decent ARR. And when I say ARR, I mean like annualized run rate. So our 6-month cohort retention was at like 80%. It was
wow.
We were destroying our competition in terms of retention. We murdered. Like I look back on the numbers and I'm like, damn, we were really freaking good.
What the hell did you do to get that retention? What was your service like? What was the retention rate? Why is it so high?
So there was a data point that we found out, which was very key in how we looked at things, is that we found out that when the customer gets to the third order, they are extremely loyal after that, which is really interesting. And they're even more loyal if an order messes up within those 3 orders, and then we fix it, and then we give a credit to the next order. So, which is really interesting. It's just like if you mess up, but then you correct it and give great customer service afterwards, they become extremely loyal afterwards. And the magic number was 3. We got to get them to the third order. And so that was something that we kind of focused on, is like, okay, make sure the first 3 orders, they go very well. If something messes up, we'll give them a little bit more extra credit than if they were like if they've been with us for a very long time, because we want to get them to that third order. And then at the same time, we also like, okay, let's shoot them like some deals if they're like they've only ordered from us once or twice, and then kind of get them back into our like the habit of ordering food delivery. And so as soon as that happened, it's just like boom, like we 80% chance they stay with us forever.
Nice. I can imagine that one of like sneaky strategies that like you deliberately mess up the second order to make sure to get that third one.
Yeah, it was definitely like a stickler in terms of making sure our operations was extremely smooth and that every order went perfectly. So we have like this God mode in our operations dashboard, and I'm watching it like 24/7, like every single second I'm watching these orders, like even like during the middle of the meetings I'm looking at it making sure things are going well.
That's awesome. So that's where players like Square started to take notice of you. So you did it to 12 cities. It's not a crazy expansion, but it was strategic expansions into very top tier cities with
Right.
Probably high density. New York City, SF. I don't know if were you in San Diego as well?
We weren't in San Diego yet.
Okay, got it. But it was like maybe Austin and maybe a few others as well. Okay, and so
right
from there, when Square did started to take notice of you, what was that conversation like? Did you call them? Did they call you? Maybe go through the steps there.
So they reached out to us because we had just raised our Series A from Tiger Global. So we were on the news on TechCrunch and all this stuff. And then because we raised that money, we were looking to hire a chief marketing officer. And one of the candidates that we were looking to hire ended up at Square. And then apparently Square was going through some business development of their own to do food delivery or food pickup through their POS system. And I guess during their conversation of business development, that marketing guy is like, hey, we should reach out to Caviar, who I interviewed for. And so that guy connected us to this Square team. And they came to our office. So the guy who led it was, at the time, he was a chief product officer for Square, a guy named Gokul. He's over at DoorDash. But he essentially was telling us, hey, we would like to partner with you guys. Like, how about you guys work, like, kind of integrate with the Square POS system, and so that, like, if an order goes through our system, it goes to Square's system, or like people can order through the Square's POS or Square's app to order delivery, and we provide the back end for that. So it was like an open conversation at the time. We honestly, we didn't really take it too seriously just because we're just so busy trying to expand. We just raised like a ton of money, and then like I'm hiring like crazy at the moment. At the time, I was trying to compete for engineers with DoorDash, Postmates, and Uber was trying to get into game, and there was like 10 other food delivery services that I was trying to compete for software engineers, and it was a good time if you're an engineer. It was very hard to get the people that we want. And so we didn't really take it too seriously until the CFO, Sarah Fryer, who is now the CEO of Nextdoor, she flew out to Boston when Jason and I was there to help expand that city. And she met with Jason. Essentially, it's like, okay, we're thinking about acquiring you guys. Like, is that a conversation you want? And so we're like, okay, this is interesting. Like, went from partnership to acquisition, and then Jason and I, we needed to fly to Miami the following week, and their business dev guy named Jason Lee called us, and he's like, hey, I have an offer. And $100 million, all-stock deal. Think about it, right? And so, I had quite a conversation with our other co-founders while Jason and I were in Miami, and then we decided to take it
Was
that night.
How long did it take for you to say yes? Like, was it already at the back of your mind, at least as soon as you hung up in Miami, saying, okay, this sounds like a good deal, or did you have to ruminate around it for a couple of days?
I mean, I think we didn't think too long about it. Like, we definitely had like a long discussion that night, but we were definitely going through all the pros and cons, and like, man, this is a lot of money. Like this, and one of the biggest promises that they gave us was that they're going to send us 20 of their best engineers on day one. I was like, we need them. Like, the backlog on a product roadmap is way long, and I felt like we were behind in several key features that our competitors had. I'm like, it's a lot of money, and they're giving us like the engineers that we need. If Caviar is to succeed, this might be the opportunity that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. So was the strategy for Square to sort of acquire you guys and sort of like integrate it into the Square ecosystem? Obviously, that's part of the plan. But would Caviar as an entity still exist? It's just owned by Square, or would it just be
right?
Like
the entity
Square
would exist. Yeah. So they said it was essentially like an entity that's owned by Square.
Okay.
But we did end up like working with them to integrate into POS systems, to cross-sell POS systems to the restaurants that we worked with, stuff like that. So that's the benefit that they saw, and we just said like, okay, let's do it.
Did you ever think about in your mind where like, because there's been a lot of companies throughout the years where they've said no to acquisitions, and because they truly believe that this is worth much more down the road. Was there a thought about that, or because obviously there was it was a very crowded space at that point as well. So I can imagine where you could sort of like, well, have a company like Square, much more resources, much more money, acquire you guys and help build Caviar out, or alternatively stick it out yourself and sort of ride this to even higher planes. Did that even cross your mind at that point?
Oh, absolutely. Like, pretty much every day until the deal closed. Like, we were talking to our investors, to Tiger Global, who was our main investor, and they were actually very much for the acquisition, even though like they literally just gave us the money like a month before. They're like, you know what? So what worked out was that Square was already on the board, Tiger Global was already on the board of Square, and for them, they're like, we love Square. Like, we think it's a great acquisition, and that we're giving you the thumbs up to take the money. Of course, we had other investors who, let's just say, like, cussed us out for a solid 30 minutes of like, why are you taking this deal? Blah,
keep
blah,
going.
yeah. But I will say, like, despite getting cussed out, like really badly, you love to have investors as passionate as them, because they really during our early days they really supported us. They were so passionate about what we were doing. I love those investors. But end of the day, we decided to listen to Tiger Global and also our gut feeling and took that.
How long was the entire process from beginning to end when you actually signed it up and even got the wire to
5 months.
Actually, that's not bad.
Yeah,
okay.
Not bad. But every day was grueling because we're just we're trying to launch, we're trying to be perfect. We didn't want the deal to fall through for any reason either, so we're a bit nervous to make sure things go smoothly. At the same time, they're digging through our IP, and we're just man, they could totally just copy our shit and try to outdo everybody by just putting a ton of money and then use $100 million to build their own Caviar competitor. Right. So but then of course they also interviewed all of our engineers as well, and so all of our engineers were extremely worried that they passed the test or not, and at the same time they had to keep their mouth shut as well. They couldn't tell anybody else in the company that they were getting interviewed.
Man, can you? What was the? Because I assume during that time, that 5-month period, you still had to work on Caviar, right? And it was still a separate thing. Still had to grow the business, and while they were doing their due diligence.
Yeah, I had to go through the whole due diligence, thinking that we're not going to get acquired. It's just it's business as usual. We gotta keep going. Let's beat our competition. Get to a healthy Series B sort of number. That's the only mentality I had. But of course it went through.
So once it did go through, what was that feeling like? Knowing that you had money in the bank, you had, you basically built a company from scratch and then sold it off to a company like Square. Was it elation? Were you just excited, or there was a spike in dopamine and then it went back to just a normal life again? What was the experience after that?
Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't I wasn't super elated. I was actually probably more. I think I was happier when I was in Miami with Jason when hearing that number for the first time. After we signed everything, I just kind of numb. It's just okay, cool. This was exhausting, and I'm so glad that we had a good run at it. But of course, I still had to stay with the company for longer, and so I was okay, well, back to work. Let's just, now that we got acquisition, now I gotta prove to Square that our acquisition was worth their money.
How much longer did you stay on before you left?
2 years. So after 2 years, our golden handcuffs were off, and me and my co-founders, we all left on the same day.
Yeah. And what's the I guess the state of then eventually very quickly after you left and sort of it was humming along pretty nicely, DoorDash comes along. They sort of take off, and they have now the sort of the power to acquire, and so they decided to purchase Caviar from Square. So that was a nice multiple for Square as well. But I assume there was no personal involvement at that time, right?
Not for me. I was sort of indirectly involved because I was kind of going through my own channels, my former employees. That was part of the transition from Square over to DoorDash. I'm oh, how are things going? How's the acquisition? How are things over there? But I was more, I love my employees. I love the people that work for me. And so I was invested in their journey.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2020 hindsight, and this is, I usually ask this because we all know building companies is freaking hard. So knowing that what you know now, and knowing that you would have to go through all of the ups and downs of building Caviar, if you were back to your college days again and you were given the opportunity to start a company, would you do it again or not?
Yeah, I'd definitely do it again. I was young and naive, but also very optimistic about life, about myself, very confident in my own abilities. So it takes a bit of stupidity to want to do a startup. Like, it's freaking hard, right? So you have to be a little bit naive to like want to go do something like that.
Yeah.
And I was definitely like that in college.
I think also it's just like, just being oblivious, and ignorance is
Right.
bliss is definitely a virtue at that point, because you just don't know how hard it's going to get. And that's a good thing. If you knew how hard it was going to get, you probably no one would do whatever they're doing to build
Yeah.
companies.
I honestly I envy those founders who do like 2, 3, 4 companies. It's just like, wow, man, they are like putting themselves through so many I don't know, like so much pain to build all these companies. So I envy their ability to do that.
Would you change anything? Obviously, if you did go on this path again, would you repeat every step the same, or would there be certain things that you would change because just from lessons learned?
I definitely would change a few things, just in terms of what we should have prioritized on the product roadmap. I would say that I wish that we went a little bit earlier in terms of developing our mobile app. So it's the mobile app is why food delivery is as big as it is today. Like on demand would not be a thing without a cell phone, especially one with GPS. And so I wish we developed that a little bit better and faster than our competition. The other thing that I learned was that we should have focused more on families where both the parents were working. The reasoning is that they don't have time to cook, so they ended up becoming like the most consistent orders. Is when both the parents are working, but they need to feed their child, right? But they don't got time, and so but because they are double salary like families, like they have the money to pay for delivery every single day. So that was like a target group that I wish I'd identified early on.
Was there any, in terms of like just being a founder and sort of dealing with your mental state, is there any advice that you can give for people who are sort of going through building their own company for now and trying to figure out, how do I navigate this world? It's so hard, it's so tough, I'm getting rejected left, right and center, but I need to keep going, and it takes a toll mentally and even physically at some points. Is there any advice you can give to those people?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's any of help, but the pain or the depression that they're going through now, a lot of founders around them are going through the same thing. I definitely felt like I didn't network enough with other founders at the time. It would have been helpful mentally to be able to have talked to them about my emotional problems, like things aren't going right. Like everyone says I'm an idiot for building this company. Like it's always good to talk to other founders. Like, yeah, I have the same problem. It's okay. Like we're all going through it together. There's something about like sharing the same struggles. It makes you feel happier that you're not alone in this struggle.
I think that's definitely helped me as well. Like, and also like people is like knowing that you're not alone, and being alone is probably the worst feeling in the world. That you think that there are other people who are living amazing lives and happy, and then you're the only one that's sort of sad and down in the dumps. But knowing that there is a community of people trying to do very similar things, albeit different companies, different goals, but they're all starting to build something that's hard. And it's actually nice to know that you have a community out there which can help.
Right, and people need to know and most founders I would say are fairly young. Like even if like you're under 40 years old starting a company, you're still early in your life, your first half of your life. And so even if you fail, even if you don't do right, like you still have another second half of your life to keep going and keep trying. And so whatever you're working on today, that is not your identity. That is not what you're going to end up like doing the rest of your life. Like I highly doubt it. And even for me today, like even though people know me as the Caviar person, like what I focus all my time on is building restaurants and being passionate about food, which is the identity I would like to have.
Well, you're definitely a massive foodie as far as I can tell. But also, it's really cool to see that you are now positioning yourself to be working with a lot of these restaurants. Just quickly tell us a little bit about what that is. Are you building restaurants yourself? Are you investing in them? Like, what's the goal here?
Yeah, both. So any restaurants or bars that I just like, or the people that I like, I give them some money. Otherwise, I've always liked quick service restaurants. I love street food as well, and so we were expanding this one concept called Rooster and Rice, which is chicken rice or khao man gai in Thailand, and it's a common street food in Southeast Asia that we wanted to kind of expand nationally, and so that's something that I'm working on right now.
So is the plan here to have like a portfolio of companies, like you have the holdco, and then out of that you'll have different subsidiaries of yes. restaurants where you can sort of like have this investment instead of like real estate portfolio, it's a restaurant portfolio of companies, and then you can sort of work on each one as you see it fit, and sort of have it become self-managing, have the general manager or some sort of like operations guy, but then you can come in once in a while, think about the vision, think about expansion and all the strategic stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do.
Cool. That's really awesome. And then finally, how do you I think one thing that people want to sort of take away is that what's your routine like that compared today versus what you was a founder, and how have you is routine important to you, or do you just go with the flow on a daily basis? How do you structure your day?
I mean, nowadays I kind of go with the flow. I have time to play golf, which is kind of amazing. I like to structure my day in terms of like when I take meetings, do emails, and then like save time to like whatever extra work I need to do to advise or help out other startup companies. Before it was just like I wake up early in the morning, put out a fire, put out another fire, VC meeting with Jason, put out more fires, and then do it all over again.
There's a lot of resilience. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
They can just email me. It's Shawn@belugacapital.co. It's the Angels. Beluga Capital is an angel syndicate between me and my former co-founders.
Got it. And I'll put all of that links into the description notes below. Thank you so much, Shawn. Really appreciate it. I think that there's a lot of nuggets in there. I hope everyone will sort of listen to this and hopefully get inspired to continue building, but also learn a thing or two about resilience, keep pushing forward and seeing, if they can build their next thing as well. So definitely great to have you on, and thank you so much for your time.
All right. Happy to be here.